Okay, good morning everyone. I'd like to welcome you here today to our first Environment and Communities meeting, which has been derived from the old Operations Committee, and the water and the roading sides of that committee has been taken out. So we will start our meeting today with the Karakia Deputy Mayor Aubrey Rea is going to do that for us.
Morena tātou, ka tīmata te karakia. E te atua tēnei mātou o pono tuku whakamoemiti atu ki a koe I tēnei ata. E te atua tēnei mātou e inoi atu ki a koe tukuna mai tō koro wai aroha, tō koro wai Manaaki, I tēnei wā ki runga I te whārua o Waituhi, ki runga I te whānau ākai mō tō tātou whāia, tō tātou koka a Hinti, I Hinga, I Nāpo. O tira kia rātou katoa e noho ana I raro I te kapua Pauri, I tēnei wā e te atua, koenei tā mātou inoi atu ki a koe. Arahina mai hoki mātou I roto I ngā mahi kei mui a mātou, ngā mahi hei oranga mo te taia o tira mo ngā hapori katoa o Turanga Nui a Kiwa. Koenei tā mātou inoi atu ki a koe I tēnei ata. Āmene.
Thank you. So we have two deputations this morning, but first of all we'll just get through a little bit of business. We'll start with apologies. I have apologies for lateness from Councillor Huriwai. Is there any other apologies?
Councillor Parata is going to be online.
And also we welcome Councillor Gibson online today.
So I'll move for lateness for Councillor Parata and lateness Councillor Huriwai.
And they're both going to be online. Any declarations of interest with today's agenda?
Just need to second apologies.
Sorry. Can I have someone to move the apologies? Thank you, Councillor Rea, and seconded by Councillor Tibble. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, so now we'll do declarations of interest. And there seem to be none of those. Oh, sorry, Councillor.
Last week, in terms of the allocation for the Natural Heritage Fund, but I think they missed one off the list, so it's not there.
I'd also like to register that, just that I've worked with the majority of the landowners that have applied on their projects. So, yeah, that's right.
Okay, so we will go to the governance work plan on page 3, which all of those matters are in today's agenda. And there's no minutes today because this is the first meeting. And next is leave of absence. There's no leave of absence. Acknowledgements and tributes. And
Sorry. Kia ora tātou. I just want an opportunity to acknowledge that this week we celebrate the 160 years for the Wairingahika siege on the Wairingahika Pā. It started this morning with Karakia at 6 o'clock to open the new exhibition site, and there will be an official ceremony at the Tairāwhiti Museum at 6 p.m. and then also the large remembrance ceremony will happen on site at Wairingahika on Saturday. So I just wanted to acknowledge their kaupapa this week. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you, Campbell. Okay, so we are ready for our deputations. First of all, I'll ask Judy, Campbell and Willie from Manaaki, Tairāwhiti to come forward, and they're going to talk to us today about community commissioning.
Where would you like us to proceed from?
Come forward and
Kia ora tātou. Many of you know me, but I'm Judy Campbell. I'm a strategic advisor at Manaaki Tairāwhiti, and Willie will introduce himself, but we're here to present to you on an opportunity that the region is undertaking at the moment. And thank you to the committee chair and to the mayor and chief executive for putting this on the agenda at the last minute. we wanted to be able to talk to councillors as quickly as possible as we start to go public on this process. This is about community commissioning and social investment in our region. So community commissioning is the process whereby services are purchased from providers, and in this case in social services. So our definition of social services includes what you might traditionally think of social services through MSD, family violence, sexual violence, but also education, health, and workforce development, so the whole kit and caboodle. We have, as is typical in our region, higher ambitions than the government is expecting. So this is an opportunity that's coming through the Social Investment Agency. The Social Investment Agency was only created last year and is the vehicle by which the government is seeking to transform the way in which social services are provided across the country. The Social Investment Agency, whose chief executive is on leave at the moment, reports to Minister Willis as the Minister of Social Investment, but it is backed by a Social Investment Board, which is pan-party, has a $200 million fund of its own, which has been its own appropriation, but the vision is that the Social Investment Agency will drive the way in which all social investment happens across all ministries. And that's something in the $700 billion, I think, the government spends in social services across the nation. So there are 4 pathways into the Social Investment Fund, which is the $200 million fund. The first one, we are only talking really about Pathway 3 and Pathway 4. For completeness, most of the $200 million is being assigned to innovative services that are being purchased directly by the Social Investment Agency with a group of innovative providers. So that pathway opened and closed a couple of months ago, and the SIA is in negotiation with a number of providers. Pathway 2 is contract consolidation. So in our region, the big social service providers like Tromp-Nui or Turanga or Trotac might have as many as 50 contracts with government agencies. So they might have, 10 or 12 with the same government agency for slightly different things. So for driver licensing or young mothers or family violence services. Pathway 2 is about saying this is an opportunity to consolidate all of that into a single contract, to be outcome focused as opposed to output and methodology controlled, but also for all of the contract compliance to move to the SIA and not to the original ministries that led the contract. Expressions of interest were called for this one a couple of months ago and closed. As I say, these processes are very fast. There's very little policy out and available to look at. There is a website for the Social Investment Agency that describes all these things. We understand that maybe 2 or 3 entities in our region are in negotiations on Pathway 2. Pathway 4 is about looking at the way in which philanthropy invests and marrying that into this process, which is about innovation and outcome measurement as opposed to control of the methodology. So Trust Tairāwhiti, ECCT are interested in their relationships in Pathway 4. Pathway 3, which is the one I'm going to spend the rest of the time talking about, is about devolution of decision-making rights and potentially money to community-based entities or regions. Somebody made the comment on our board recently that they've done it in the wrong order, because actually, if you're in Pathway 3, you would do all of Pathway 1, 2 and 4, but that's the way it's being released. So what we understand is decisions are being made through Cabinet in December, and a very small number of regions or entities will be invited to put in an expression of interest to Pathway 3 in January. So no Christmas holiday this year. We believe that we are one of that very small number that will be invited to put in their EOI. So the key to being invited is that the government has trust and confidence in you as an entity or a region, that you already have experience in community commissioning, and that you have some kind of community governance process already. So GDC has been part of Manaaki Tairāwhiti since its inception 7-8 years ago. We include the public service entities, iwi, and the NGOs. And we've partnered with the iwi entities, the specific iwi entities, to lead this bid as a region to say that we are after the whole kit and caboodle of social services, and that we, as a region, are capable of not letting the government down, but also not letting whānau down, and actually delivering what it is that whānau need and want in this process. I won't read the big slides, they'll be available to you afterwards. Just wanted to mention who's in the working party in terms of, when I present, people look at me and say, well, who are you? Who are you to be leading this on behalf of the region? And the answer is, I'm just a spokesperson on behalf of a working party that is working on behalf of the key regional entities. So many of you will know the names on that list in terms of who's actually working on the bid. So we believe that the potential for impact is high. We believe that if we were free to make choices as a region about how the $1.5 billion that is spent in our region annually by the government and social services, we made choices about how that was spent, that we would have better impact for whānau and for our community and for our GDP. So the research that we have done says 1.5 billion from the government and region, 1.5 billion from all the rest of us, so from Trust Tairāwhiti, from council, from NGOs, and that our opportunity here, if you want to talk in economic terms, is an uplift in GDP that's in the billions of dollars as well. So lots of conversations happening about what does it mean to be community-led, and what does it mean to progress the bid. And part of the reason that we're here, as I say, is that it has to be clear that there is a community mandate to create this entity to do this task. Lots of work in the background, lots of detail, and if you go to the Manaaki Tairāwhiti website, all of that information is there, but part of our publicity campaign is to start providing that entity, that information to all of the membership organisations, so it's on your websites as well, so we'll get back to you on any of that kind of stuff. So this is part of building that clarity of mandate. As most of you would know, the Prime Minister was here for the AMP show, and we had the opportunity to provide him with a presentation and with a letter from the region socialising our bid in advance of the call for expressions of interest. That letter was signed by the chairs or senior governors of each of these entities. Ngāti Porou is not in the process at the moment, while it makes a decision about whether this is a pathway that they want to undertake or whether their opportunity is best through their bilateral, through their settlement agreements at the taumata. So a reminder who's on Manaaki Tairāwhiti, has always been chaired by iwi, originally Hirawini and Ron from Ngāti Porou and Trotac, then George and Ron, and at the moment, technically still Ngāti Porou, but nobody's coming to the meetings. Sorry, I tell a lie. No Mai Whitewood has been endorsed as the Ngāti Porou board member on behalf of Ngāti Porou into Manaaki Tairāwhiti. Then there are the community organisations, and then there is all of the senior ministries that are involved in the provision of social services in our region. So the pitch that we're making is on the basis of vote Tairāwhiti, and that's an expression that we use to say we don't want a contract. We don't want a small contract. If we're talking in the low tens of millions, then we've failed. If we're talking in the billions, then we've got the whole lot. And if we're talking in the hundreds of millions, then we're on the pathway in the right direction. And the vote Tairāwhiti concept is that we don't want it by slices. We don't want a bit for housing and a bit for health and a bit for education. We want the whole sum provided to the region for a regional entity to make the decisions on how it is split and spent at all. So not contracts, but devolution and a vote process that is regionally based as opposed to subject matter based. So we're ambitious, as I say, and our understanding of the small number of entities that meet the criteria to be able to do an expression of interest is that we are probably the only one that's going for the whole system. But as I say, the government of its many colours over the years is used to us doing it differently, but as I say, also used to us being able to actually deliver. And many of you will know the Toitu housing story that starts with 5 houses a year and is doing 50 plus now and is in the hundreds of millions because they made that commitment to government, government backed them, gave them the money and they got on with it. That's who we're case studying off. Toitu Tairāwhiti, many of you will know what Remediation does at Tūranga Health, where he has those little sliced up contracts and then he takes the little bit of surplus off all of them and then does what he wants with it, and that's the Elgin Hub, where he runs a cafe for free, fitness gym for free, health and ear checks for free. So we know that we have in the region providers who understand whānau, are committed to walking with whānau, not dictating to them, and then can produce those outcomes that people are looking for. We are starting to work on draft operating principles, and this is, in advance of the creation of the entity, because if we get the operating principles right, it really doesn't matter what the entity's legal shape and form is, as long as it's doing the things that we believe it needs to do. So those are things like that the entity would be owned by the community in some kind of way. The ownership of course, is not for profit, would be for charitable purposes, and would ensure that there's some kind of way that the many organisations in our region interested in social services have some kind of say on the future of the way in which commissioning happens, but that they elect a board that is skill-based and has some distance between the money coming in and the money then being commissioned to the providers in our region. We may be driven by data and insights and by the whānau, and that's something that most of our providers are already doing, but it is the key principle that this is not about providers, this is not about the commissioning entity, it is not about the owners of the commissioning entity, it's about the whānau and what the whānau need. It won't be prescriptive about the way in which providers deliver services. It will work with providers to work on ways of measuring outcomes. We don't want to have devolution from the government to then act as though we're the government and do all the kinds of things that the government does in contracting, which means that we're all just in this churn where people who are in the system hardly ever get out. So a key principle is that this has to be about scale. Part of the problem that happens now is that you get a contract for, and it might be quite large, it might be $1 million, it might be $10 million, but I say it takes a human being who has all kinds of complex issues in life and gives a provider a slice of that human being and says, you deal with the budgeting, or you deal with the fact that they're a young mother, or you deal with the fact that they have a custodial prison sentence and need somewhere to live afterwards, when actually the whānau may be all of those things at once. So one of the problems happens is even if you've got a sizable contract and you can do things the way that you want, ultimately the whānau still has to interact with the government and all the other agencies for all the rest of their life. So scale's important, not to be important, but to be able to be independent of government policy and do it the way the region wants and the way the whānau wants. We need to be agile, we need to be data-driven, we need to be evidence-based, and those are all things that many of us have been practicing in social services for a long time now. It's one of the reasons that we're invited, we believe that we'll be invited to the table. So what we are seeking from organisations like you, as I say, the Mayor has given support in principle, is that the whole community comes with us on this journey, that when any questions that you have, any comments or or insights that you want to provide to the bid process are welcome. We're setting up a page on the Manaaki website to receive engagement, but after this you can ask any questions, make any comments that you like, so that when people come into our region, everybody says, yes, I know about that community commissioning stuff and we agree with it and we're behind that. So that's the end of the formal part of the presentation, and happy really to take any questions.
You were talking about there's 3 types of proposals. There's one in the low millions, one that's maybe around the hundreds of millions, and then the whole kit and caboodle. Do we run a danger that if you get, say, a smaller bid, that you still have to run this convoluted system with everything else that's not included in that, and then this new system?
So that's why the principles become important. So if we've said, and by the time we get to December and we ask people to actually adopt the legal structure and the operating principles, if scale's important and we only got 10 million, then our response would be to either, if it's less than 10 million, would be to turn it down. And if it was in the tens of millions and we don't feel that we could give that kind of independence, then maybe we'd only do it with one provider, as opposed to taking that 10 million and slicing it in exactly the same way the government.
Thanks.
Teddy.
You made the comment in terms of the board or the directors having some distance from the money coming in and the money going out to providers. I'm taking that in relation to a conflict of where the money's going. So are you proposing that this board or governors, because in Gizzy you know most people are external by the district?
No, not at all. In fact, we have weekly meetings, and last night I polished off the first discussion document inside the working party for the way in which the board and the governance process might work in the legal entity. And one of the things is, so no, you really shouldn't be on the board if you're receiving the funding, but in our region, you would of course be in some way related to everybody who's receiving the funding. So their conflict of interest management policy would be strong, but the importance would be that we have people who understand our region, understand what we're pitching for, what we would be contracted for, and have the skills to help us. That may not be absolutely everybody on the board, because independence is good, but certainly the majority of the board is envisaged to be from the region and knowledgeable about these things.
We have Councillor Gibson online with a question.
Kia ora. I love the vision. I see real value in this model. We've spoken a lot about the larger providers, and I have a question around the interface, whether you can unpack the interface between smaller providers that may just have one contract or two contracts, and that might be their lifeblood really. So like, for example, Tairāwhiti, Tauafi Men's Centre, what's the interface between those smaller entities and providers, if you wouldn't mind unpacking that a little bit?
Sure. As I say, we don't want to repeat the Crown processes of having little contracts, including with smaller organisations, but as it happens, there is an opportunity on the table out of what was called Te Puna Aonui and the now called the Centre for Family Violence, Sexual Violence Prevention, which is also a devolution proposal and is based on work that the region has been doing as an iwi hub. So a network of smaller providers could well fit the model as opposed to a small provider. Unless we do achieve the 1.5 billion, then there will still be a system that's in existence that is not part of community commissioning. Our vision is that over time it will all move into community control, and I keep need to make that emphasis because we're also good in regions sometimes about being worried about who's in charge. This is a regional process. Whatever the legal entity, it will be owned by the region, directed by the region, and so it's about the region having control about the way in which the money is spent rather than a particular person or a particular entity. And I say, that's a journey that we believe we'll be on for the next 10 to 20 years to get to the point where it is fully devolved. I'd point you in the direction of local government in the UK, where different model, local government is already involved in social services in a different way. but they have been modelling devolution now for the last decade, and there are a couple of cities now that are well advanced in the city making the decisions, all the decisions that impact on the city, as opposed to Westminster. So that's our long journey in the vision for us as a region.
Councillor Foster.
Yeah, I just have one question. When you said there's 35,000 out of 52,000 that have government assistance in this region, are you including retirement beneficiaries in that figure?
Yeah, so the work that we've done on what is the $1.5 billion that the government invests, is the whole of what the government invests. This is one of those ones where the government is thinking smaller than we do. So they think that surgery is off the table, that benefits are off the table, that the school system is off the table. And we don't see why any of those can't be on the table as we grow and develop. That, do you want to talk to the health issue of the way in which you envisage that might work?
Yeah, kia ora koutou, tēnā koe Aubrey nā haurei whakatiwheretia tō tātou hui, kia ora tātou. Just in terms of the questions that have been asked, I want to paint a big picture first. The big picture is 1.5 billion per annum is tagged for this region across health, housing, education, social services, workforce development and economic development, okay? Despite that, we have some of the worst social deprivation in the country. And so you latched on to 35,000, and that's absolutely right. So 61% suffer from some form of social deprivation. 40% are wholly funded by the government, okay? And so that's the profile of our community. So what we've said is, how is that money allocated? 1.5 billion is tagged for the region per annum, right? 800 million is government overhead. 700 million actually makes the region. Of that, 30 million makes it to iwi organisations. So iwi organisations with the highest social deprivation have 30 million of 1.5 billion. So this model's wrong. This model's wrong because of the social deprivation. And so we've got to take a long-term perspective. Simply putting in a commissioning agency, we believe that we can halve those overheads. We still have to have real-time data that keeps us informed and monitors exactly what's happening within our communities. But you take that 400 million that's put into servicing, that's put into capital. And then over that 10-year period, what Simon Hunter has predicted is that if they invest in us, we're not looking for new money. We're saying they're useless at using their existing money. And so we're not looking for new money. We said that to Minister Willis last November in her workshop in Wellington. And so if that's the case, by year 11, we have increased the GDP in this region by 1.8 billion per year, all right? And so how do we achieve that? By the reduction of social deprivation, by moving people, lifting the work skills and moving into the workforce and increasing the productivity. So we need that 10-year run-in. A good cohort to look at is, for our Māori women under the census in 2023, 71% are solo mums. There are 355 that have children under the age of 5. If we look at the last 10 years of those families that are wholly on benefits, if we don't ensure that those children stay at school after the age of 12 and get to year 13 and go on to further education, a trade, etc., the reality is that they will drop out of the system and they will cost the state $650,000 per year, right? And so what Bill English said is that we need to look at a pay-it-forward system. How can we intervene now? How can we actually not only reduce those costs, but increase the productivity and increase the investment in those? So if I can take that, that's 180 million. So you've got 400 million that we can save in overheads. You then actually step in and intervene and make sure that those tamariki under the age of 5 stay at school the duration. That lifts the productivity for our whole region. And so people may not like that we look at it in economic terms. The reality is that people have money in their pocket, they're living better. And at the moment, 30% of my te aitanga Manaaki, people that earn less than $20,000 a year, that's $380 a week, live in their tribal region. So my people are the poorest in their tribal region. And so there's a lot of work that we need to do, but this is the start. And it's basically saying we don't want to be treated with nickel and dimes. This is what comes into our region. We've shown that we have the ability to lead this, all right? And so give us the opportunity, and it's not about us getting cumbersome contracts. What's the well-being outcomes that we all want? That's what we focus on. And then how can we best achieve those? Because in the absence of that type of leadership, the reality is we're waiting for another crisis. Because in a crisis like Cyclone Gabriel, the rules were thrown out the window. And then we were able to just get on with it. And so how do we create an environment we can do that? So fully support what Judy has presented. We've got a great team that's working on this. We've done our presentation to the Prime Minister. Cabinet meets on the 8th of December. We want to put our best foot forward, and that's why we need your support.
So if you think iwi's already running schools, iwi's already running health systems, it may not be running surgery, but what happens in the region is someone in Wellington decides how many hip operations and how many heart operations happen. So what we're talking about is regional control on how that happens, as opposed to that we're going to employ a bunch of surgeons. Jeremy.
Kia ora. You talked about them, the separation between governance and the providers being commissioned as much as possible. I think that's really important. Also, it would be good if you could talk a little bit about the electoral college that would elect the governance and the membership of that and potential size of it.
That's the thing that we're working on the back, and I say that's where if you create the principles and we all agree to the principles, then the back office and the way in which the legal entity is structured. So, incorporated society, charitable trust, or limited liability charitable company that doesn't pay tax. So any of those has a ownership process that then enables the owners to have a vote in the way in which the board is elected. So by electing the board in a non-representative way on the basis of a skills matrix, then the separation is whichever one of those structures has now quite current law, all of them, trusts and incorporated societies, as you know, have been updated, and the Companies Act isn't that old. So that gives the directors of the board really clear guidance on their conflicts of interest and the management of conflict of interest. But at the same time allows you to have community representation in your governance, sorry, not representation, community feeling and understanding and expertise in your governance without being $1.5 billion came in the door and the board decided to give it to someone who's on the board.
I think the other thing, Jeremy, is that as we presented last week at the conference, we clearly said we want something that the community feels they own. And so we need to ensure that everyone from those 5 sectors, from those 5 areas are a part of it. Iwi, Regional Council, philanthropic, government agencies, all of those need to feel that they're a part of it, including our community. Because if it doesn't look like them, it won't be successful. So we need this to sustain over at least a decade to set in place a new behaviour, a new way of doing things, so that we can use that as a stepping stone to go to the future. So that electoral college must look like it includes everyone. And so we use electoral college language because Te Hukai Moana, we've got over 70 iwi, they come together in electoral college and then they appoint the board of directors for Te Hukai Moana, which is our biggest settlement in terms of fisheries. So it'll be that community grouping, whether it's electoral college or some other form that's chosen, and they then choose the directors that then lead the company. And like was covered in the first point, there needs to be those conflict of interest to ensure that we keep everyone safe.
I've got a last quick question from Councillor Thompson, please, and then we need to get on with it.
So my understanding is we can only ask questions of clarification at submission. So you're saying you want our support before the 8th of December, so are you suggesting we have a paper come to council before?
So whenever the Cabinet meets on the 8th of December to decide, so if you go to the SIA website, you can get up there. But you won't get anything beyond the headline, we're looking at community commissioning and we're going to call for expressions of interest in January or early 2026, it says. They're making the policy up as they're flying the plane. So the meeting in December, we understand, will be the settling of the policy and perhaps the settling of who will be invited. So the expressions of interest is until 2026. But given that kind of a timeline, we can't be going around in January asking people, what do you think about this and what should we do and what will the structure be? So we'd probably be looking for your December meetings to actually endorse something with papers on the agenda.
Sharing that with us. Very quickly.
Right, just for clarification, you mentioned health, education. So you're talking about all the money that comes into this area. This is teachers' salaries, doctors.
That's what makes up the...
So you're talking the whole package.
Yes.
So with that, it's going to bring some real behaviour changes that are going to need to happen, because then you're going to be dealing with unions, strikes. We need more money. It's not going to be able to turn around and
blame someone else.
Blame the government. So, you know, that's all part of the whole.
That's part of the pitch. And as I say, there are iwi and charitable entities already running education activities in this region that already deal with unions. One of our next steps is stops is with EIT. You know, we're all used to dealing with the way in which salaries are set. The problem has always been that most of that is centrally driven from Wellington and does not understand our circumstances and makes choices that are not necessarily what we would do if we had the ability to make the decision. That's why Ron Epi always differentiates between, is the $1.8 billion in our bank account versus do we have decision-making rights over the $1.8 billion. So decision rights is the bottom line. Money in the bank would be a good thing, because then we would also be accruing the interest and being able to spend that as well. But to say is being able to make the decisions that we want. Thank you. Thank you.
Now I'll call on Pat Seymour and Bessie Macy from the Uawa Cycle and Walkway Charitable Trust to bring us a short presentation we'll hear about.
Thank you. Ora tata, and thank you, Chairman Debbie, for allowing us to present this morning. I acknowledge the Mayor, Chief Executive, acknowledge returning councillors and congratulate new councillors. And I have presented or left with your office a copy of a paper that was presented about June, July last year, so all returning councillors will have seen it. New councillors won't, so just a bit of background. And this is Bessie Macy, who is one of the initiators of the Uawa Cycle and Walkway Trust. And it started, which the paper tells you, long before the elections of 2022. And it was put in place with some government money and some Gisborne District Council funding. Did get a little bit of damage in 2023 in the cyclones, and has not really been able to be properly used now. And really we want it open for Christmas. I find myself as a trustee of that trust, so that's why I'm here before you today. It is mentioned in the paper that you have on the remediation of what is really well known. It calls it in the paper as an Uawa reserve, but in actual fact everyone in Uawa knows it as the league field, albeit league was never played on it, but it does have that name as the league field, and has been used intermittently by Pony Club, was used as storage for debris from the cyclones, but the public was also invited to go and collect firewood from it. So we haven't banned people from accessing what is known as the league field. So one of the issues for the moment in getting this cycleway up and running again is that the actual portion of the cycleway that goes along the boundary of the league field is locked off. At one end there is a padlock, at the other end there's a bit of hurricane netting. We had a meeting last evening of the Trust. We meet once a month, and we've been talking to council officers for some time, and it's mainly a conversation that has been rather circuitous. So because the community is really keen to see the cycleway and walkway open for use over the summer, older members of the community in groups walk that cycleway in the mornings. Now that it's much lighter, they would have been doing it for weeks, but they tend not to do it in winter. The school was really supportive of it when it was put in place, and council officers came and chaired meetings or facilitated meetings in the fire station committee room, and everybody was involved in getting it up and running. So it's not like a new idea that someone's just popped up with. It's been around for ages. So the three things we'd really like mentioned today, and while it's not a paper in council, it does come up in that reserves paper on remediation. It would seem that there would be little risk to the public if the cycleway, which is immediately inside the fence at a boundary edge, were to be open, and it would be about 50 yards, I would think, of cycleways inside that fence. The reason it's not possible to go on the roadway is that that is on a sharp corner along parallel with the beach, and a number of people use that road and they exercise their dogs from their car, and the public just use it. So it's not particularly safe for people to be using the piece of roadway to walk on. So from today, what would be really helpful is to understand that we can have the walkway open. Our lovely Padre and his corrections team are happy to do the maintenance to enable it to be operative for the summer, but there's only about 3 weeks of his work with corrections before Christmas, so we really need an answer today to get it open so that people can use it. And then into next year, we'd like a conversation about the deferred maintenance and how it's maintained. And I understand the processes in here, that it needs to be in your 3-year plan on 1 July going forward. But somewhere we have been advised there's a small amount of money set aside for maintenance that hasn't been used. That would be great if that could be made available in the new year. We're not asking for any money before Christmas. We're actually saying if the walkway can be open, and if Padre can be authorised to undertake the work, we will see that it is in a fit state for the public to use. And then going forward, we'd like to have a point of contact in Gisborne District Council to work with. There have been a number of council officers that we've worked with over the years, but that changes quite often, and the most recent one changed again. Is there anything else, Becky, from last night you'd like me to?
No, I think Pat's actually covered kia ora koutou and mihi nui ki a koe Ngāti Winiwini. I think Pat's covered everything. It is a community safety issue that we urgently request to have rectified. Thank you.
I touched on the school, sorry, just to read it. And the school were really keen on it right at the very beginning because it allows the children a wider cycling track than just the one that's in schools. And Councillor Cranston was terribly involved in bikes in schools, wasn't he? And sat on that trust going back years. So many of our schools have a container and a bunch of bikes, and it's great for the kids to learn to ride them. But the school was really keen right from the very beginning. And going forward, there's 2 proposals, not just the township, or 2 stages. There is the potential to go across the bridge, ideally with clip-ons provided by NZTA, and then cycle to the wharf. And you will all know that our holding company is turning that motor camp into a top 10 camp, and there's big signs up in Uawa now saying it's about to open, and it will provide additional activity for people that are at the top 10 motor camp, which I understand from Jeremy is really important, not this Jeremy from the holding company. It's really important for a top 10 motor camp to have other activities for the public to do. So it's got a wide support from the community. There's been heaps of consultation. It just needs to be allowed to get on with it. So we'd love to know by the end of the week that Padre and his team can tidy it up so we can all use it for summer. Please remember that when you come to your paper on page 33 and 34 today.
Thank you for that. Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, as you mentioned, we've got a paper later today in regards to the contaminated soil. I've got a bit to say on that. Is that, I hear you mentioned the reason why it's closed. Is that the reason why they're saying it's closed? Because of the contaminated soil?
It seems to be. We can't establish any other reason short of that is the reason that this portion is locked off. So there's a padlock on one end and just a piece of hurricane netting at the other. So that part's not open. And one assumes that it is because there is a concern about accessing the league field. But as I say, it's not in the league field body of it. It's right against the boundary fence. So it shouldn't be presenting any more problems for those that walk on the road, which is like walking from here to there.
Yeah, I can just clarify, and Nat, you may be able to clarify my facts right here. They actually offered to shift the fence and open the walkway. So that's already been offered to.
I don't think it will.
No, actually, the fence, the reason the cycleway was put inside the fence was totally for safety for our children, for our tamariki. And we've never been given an explanation, a firm explanation from the GDC teams why it's closed off. So we're kind of guessing a lot of it. Nobody's come to us and said, look, we're closing it off for
an in-depth study on what the contamination is there from the old dump. So we'd like to understand that and perhaps have a dialogue with the correct teams and then move forward from there. But we would like to keep that fence where it is. And on the inside, really all we need is even tape, you know, the cautionary tape. People will stay off they don't want to go onto the grass necessarily. So we're confident that our community will stay on the path, especially once it's clear.
That's never been offered formally. There's all this hypothetical conversation goes on and nothing's been offered formally to the trustees, I'm afraid. So if we can tape it off as the summer and have all these conversations in the new year would be really, really helpful. But nobody locally wants to cut the padlock off. They do want to respect the fact that somebody put the padlock in. So we like the padlock removed.
Councillor Foster has a question.
Yeah, just a quick one. There was 300 metres of the pathway that was closed, and you were saying 50. You just need 50 metres of it open.
No, is it 300 metres? I don't think it'd be that long.
I believe it. I've had some overnight on this issue. I was going to bring it up myself. Actually, I'm so glad that you're here doing it on behalf of the community. Yeah, fantastic.
No further questions. Thank you very much for listening, and we hope that we can get some positive outcome so that Padre and his corrections team can have it operational for our public, and particularly the local community and our older people who want to exercise on it. Kia ora, everybody. Thanks very much. Enjoy your meeting.
Thank you. We would like to see you.
Rightio. We have no extraordinary business. We have no notices of motion. We have no new business, so we're right into it. Can councillors please turn to page 5, where we are looking at the lease application of the Uawa Sports Club. We have the report writer and Michelle going to open.
My name is Chris Fisser. I work in Livable Communities. I deal with a lot of the leases and licence matters, for those of you who haven't met me before. What I'm bringing to you today is a relatively straightforward proposal, which is to reissue the lease to the existing Uawa Sports Club for their existing club rooms at the main up at Tolaga Bay. So what I'm seeking from you today is your agreement to approve in principle grant of this lease. Subject to you approving in principle, we will then publicly notify that intention to grant. Should there be no submissions or objections to grant of the lease, we will just proceed and issue the lease, because your decision made today will hold as a decision to grant the lease. So I'll take the paper as read, but I'm willing to answer any questions or queries you have either about the application or the process.
Councillor Telfer.
I'd like to move the paper as it is.
Second.
I think it's well worthwhile for the community.
Are there any other questions? That was easy.
That was easy.
Just one moment. It was moved by Councillor Telfer, seconded by Mayor Stoltz. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Lovely.
Thank you. Okay, the next report is on page 14 regarding the Natural Heritage Fund allocation. Melanie Cheetham is about to talk to answer any questions about that. And is there anything you wanted to start with?
Kia ora, Melanie Cheetham, the Senior Regional Biodiversity Advisor, and I administer the Natural Heritage Fund. It's a very popular fund for biodiversity projects on private land. Once again this year we had a lot of interest with 31 very good applications. We are recommending that we stretch the funding to 19 of those, the top scoring 19. But yeah, all projects were very good. We're excited this year for the first time to be funding a project through Te Tuma Pāroa. So that's new ground for us.
questions from councillors? Councillor Alden.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question around how you analyse whether an application is efficiently based. So, for example, do you have a bit of a formula on how much a tree should cost to nurture through? So I see some applications might be $10,000, including their contribution, and 2,000 trees have been planted, whereas others would sound to be quite different on a per tree basis. Fencing, I get is easy. There's a standard fencing cost, so you can apply that formula. But do you analyse each application on that basis?
Well, as mentioned in the report, we look quite closely. So in the application form, people are asked to list their costs, so they provide a budget. So we do look closely at those costs to make sure that they are realistic. When it comes to planting and looking after trees, a little bit like fencing, it is site specific. So if some sites have a bigger weed problem than others, so they might need more, there might be more out there in terms of weed control. There might be some sites more accessible than others. The north-facing sites might be drier, or there are site-specific issues there as well. But we do look at the costs, and we ask people to provide quotes as well for purchasing the plants to make sure that those costs are.
And I'm happy to move the paper.
Councillor Ria.
I'll also second the paper, but I did have one question, and it was just for page 17.16, where any listed expenses are found not to be eligible for funding, i.e. maintenance of existing fences or projected loss of income due to retiring land from grazing, then those expenses will be removed from the amount requested. Is that standard across all applications? Like, because I see that there are some applications for fencing to surround native plant sites. So if it's to repair fencing of native plant sites, is that considered, or is it's just stock standard, no maintenance, no fence maintenance?
That is, it is stock standard, supposing no maintenance of existing fences. We have funded projects in the past to top up a conventional fence to make it into a deer-proof fence, so to just make that fence higher, or for areas sometimes that are partially fenced, we have funded to finish off that fence. But yeah, the fund is not intended to repair or repair fencing. Yeah.
But there's some amazing projects and applications, and I'll second. Thank you.
Councillor Telfer.
Yeah, just a clarification really. Page 21.24 just says that staff recognise there was a historically low uptake of the scheme, inheritance scheme on Whenua Maori, so a new matrix assessment was developed. Can you just give us a bit more what that was involved? Like, is it still based on the actual application, the worthiness of the application, or is there weightings that are put beside it as well?
Yes, so the matrix was presented to the committee June 2024, and that is laid out in one of the attachments. So part of that was the priority ranking, which is a new introduction into that sheet, which gave a slightly higher weighting to projects that were coming from catchments that had a lower uptake and a high proportion of Whenua Maori. This is the question. But yeah, the ranking sheet that we're using was presented to the committee last year for approval.
Councillor Gibson.
Kia ora, Melanie. Hey, thanks heaps for the report. I particularly love that you included all the criteria and also the maps. That makes it really easy to understand. But I also want to I say I'm super excited about how oversubscribed this is without it being hugely advertised as well. But I do have a question around, because I think like we get so much efficiency for our dollar in biodiversity gains in this space. I do have a question around whether in future we might consider the priorities for our region all being aligned out of this fund. So for me, I look at it and go, there's a lot of, and I'm a trapper, I'm someone who runs biodiversity projects. Like this is going to come across a little bit like annoying, I'm sure. But like, if we are tasked with really building resilience into our landscapes at the moment, if we have real issues with maintaining land on hillscapes and maintaining, slowing down water flow, is there potential in future application rounds, say next year, that we might actually include a metric around the additional resilience we'll get to the landscape out of this fund? So like for me, like, I run trapping projects, but to me, I'm like, there's a lot of trapping projects in there, and particularly with the impetus on slowing down water and building that resilience and that erosion issue at the moment. Is there a chance for the next couple of rounds that we put in an additional weighting into establishing diverse native forests, maybe that fencing piece, that planting piece on that really high risk areas? I just see additional wins in that space. Sorry for the long yarn.
Kia ora, Councillor Gibson. In terms of high-risk sites, there's a little bit of concern, I guess, around the investment from council being a ratepayer-based fund. If we're putting money into something that is at risk of being lost in the next flood or storm, we do look at a balanced risk. So obviously, there are projects on high-risk sites, but we look at ways that the risk to the investment has been mitigated. That makes sense. There's a fine balance, I guess, between putting money into a high-risk site and achieving benefits versus losing that money in the next storm.
I hear what you're saying. I guess what I was trying to get at was we're seeing a lot of trapping projects, but we could potentially increase our resilience, and that's what I'm trying to get at there. Is I am seeing trapping projects next to rivers too, which is all good, but I think I was asking whether we can put a bit of a weighting on building projects that get resilience into our landscape, rather than just solely biodiversity gains.
But we do, yeah. Sorry, Michelle has just shown the project Resilience was one of the new categories that we introduced last year into the matrix. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. But we can see it. Yes, yeah. Sorry, I was going to say we do try and fund a range of projects in a range of landscapes as well as where projects might receive a similar score, we will try and ensure that we are looking at a diverse range of projects as well.
Thank you. Councillor Parata.
Tēnā tātou. I just actually wanted to say that I was very impressed to see that there was an equitable distribution of the funds across the region. I'm heartened to see that some of that investment is making its way to the northern parts of our region and across to the western parts. So that I think is beneficial for the council in our region. I'm happy with the decisions and the projects being supported, but knowing that we have $233,000 of projects that we couldn't fund for one reason or another, whether or not there's any way that we maybe as a council can start considering how we might look to extend the funds that we have for the program. I know that money doesn't fall from the sky, but potentially if we start thinking strategically about how that might be able to grow over time, considering the impact that it makes to our environment.
Okay, the 10-year plan is coming. Councillor Tibble.
Kia ora Melanie, thank you for your report. My question was around, do we have any data other than what you've noted inside the report about the lack of uptake by Māori land?
Through conversation, the main barriers is, and funding is retrospective, so we don't pay out until the work has been done, and that is a barrier for some people. But that again was a mitigation for council to not wait for the work to be done to pay the money rather than handing out the money and then the rest of the work doesn't get done and then trying to get that money back. So that was one barrier.
Just a supplementary, is it possible going forward that we keep data in relation to whenua Māori applicants in this particular heritage fund so that we can get to see what might be further barriers we might need to consider to allow them to have equity in application? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, if there are no other questions, the recommendation on page 14 has been moved by Councillor Alder and seconded by Councillor Rea. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. And we're going to have a short break for morning tea. We'll be back at 10:15. Thank you. Everyone, we are going to move straight to page 33, which is our third paper on the agenda. We're looking at the Uawa Reserve remediation. We've got Natalie coming up. There.
Natalie Waihe, I am the project manager and project program manager for Livable Spaces, so Parks and Reserves, and I oversee the delivery of capital projects. So lovely to see those of you who haven't met before. This morning's paper has been mentioned, so we do have it in as a noting paper, but I'm mindful there are some synergies to the presentation we've heard this morning. The summary of the intention of the paper is to update council on a planned remediation project for Uawa, as known as Old Lease Reserve. So the reserve, as been mentioned, reserve for some time, dating back to approximately 2018 when the reserve was approved for the use of woody debris storage as the Uawa beaches began to be cleaned up from woody debris deposits. It is our understanding, and I wasn't here at the time, but it is our understanding that the fence that has been mentioned in this morning's presentation was installed at that time that the site became a deposit location for woody debris, and that was to manage some of the risk to public of obviously having stored woody debris in a reserve location and also having machinery moving in and out of that site. So the intention of the fence, is our understanding is, was for security and to secure the site for the woody debris. So the fence has been in situ for some years now. So in most recent times through the woody debris and large woody debris program, through recovery, we have cleared the site, or recovery has cleared the site of woody debris. And in doing so, obviously removing materials and potentially disturbing some of the upper cap of the site. Mentions in detail in the report, won't go into too much, but through investigations to bring the reserve back to its condition from prior to the woody debris storage, we did some site investigations, and there was an area, small area where asbestos was located, and through the wider reserve it was noted that there were fragments of materials in upper soil layers, very likely a result of both fly tipping on the site, so known dumping on the site, and the prior landfill. Moving forward, needing to look at remediating the reserve has always been on the program for us once the woody debris had been cleared, and as mentioned, this was funded in the recovery plan and as a priority project in this year's annual plan. So our intention, as mentioned in the noting paper, is to proceed with a remediation of the reserve, bringing it back to its prior condition and making it safe for public health and access for reserve purposes. We have been working with community and hapu on this matter, and happy to take questions and address from this morning's presentation. So in summary, the project is a fairly standard remediation project. There obviously are some synergies at the moment with the community group that presented, and we have been working with hapu.
Thank you. Questions, comments from Councillor Thompson?
Yeah, I've got real concerns with this paper. That this area has been used as recreational activity in rugby league from 1986 to 2018. This contaminated soil stuff has only come in fairly recently, and you could have tested that ground in one of those 32 years and come back with the same result. It's not the storage or processing of the woody debris that has caused this contamination. This contamination has always been there. Like I say, without that there, you could have tested it and it would have failed. The same things come into building now. You have these hail reports and then a DSI testing, and it just kills a whole building project. You could hoe up a field and plant coumaras and it's all okay, but you can't put a concrete slab on top. It's the truth. It's nonsense. You can't. It's like this cycle track. You can't. If you hadn't had this woody debris, you could have planted a garden there, but we can't ride push bikes or walk over it. There's just no common sense. And this is, we're talking thousands and thousands of dollars to remedial this, where, yeah, there was never any problem until this contaminated soil things come in recently. And yeah, I really struggle because it's not the storage or processing of the woody debris that has caused this contamination. This contamination's already been there. So I'm just wondering why it was even tested in the first place. Why would you test it and cause these problems for ourselves? What's initiated?
Yeah, sure. So
this testing.
Answer, I guess, the question around why we would test, but just to your earlier point around the contamination. So the landfill was always known. This is a registered hail site. However, in the progress of the removal of woody debris, the soil cap that existed on the site was disturbed. And during that process, through basic walking of the site, it was identified that there were fragments of concern in upper soil level layers. And as mentioned in the report, the consent that was granted some years ago for the storage of woody debris required council to return the reserve to its prior condition. But the consent didn't give detail on what that meant to return it to its prior condition. Now, we understand with modern standards and using brands guidelines that if we are looking at soil and an area for public use and public health and safety, we must meet those brands guidelines. So when there is visible concern in an upper soil layer, it's a due diligence and a prudent activity to undertake a DSI or a detailed site investigation to determine what type of remediation would be required. So you are correct in that the existing landfill site has always been there, but the risk to public health and safety through fragments of rubbish in the upper layers was something that was triggered through disturbance of soil through many years of trucking and moving material across the site. And through that DSI, it was the identification of asbestos that has triggered the requirement under the NES for a certain type of remediation. So had we not found asbestos, and we are still looking through the design in maybe having an increased cap in the area where the asbestos was located and a lower cap over fragment materials, because it's the asbestos that poses the public health and safety risk. So through the design that we're working with at the moment, we are trying to mitigate and minimise all of the costs related to that and look for a remediation approach that suitably covers the asbestos area and provides suitable cover to the remaining reserve as well.
Yeah, I just know with building sites, like the one thing you don't want to do is trigger one of these DSIs, because it's your projects, your project's ruined. Like you have like timber in your backyard. I'll go and test there. It's contaminated, and your project's ruined. I'm just yeah. I mean, half a metre of soil over something that was never below the soil
And it may not need to be.
32 years, and like I'll guarantee no one playing rugby or anyone's ever had any health issues from it. There's probably more health issues in trucking and everything else, putting 500 mils of soil on top of this. I'm just, I mean, did someone say we had to do this? Yeah, because in building, you do everything to avoid DSI. Were we forced to do a DSI, or?
As I mentioned, for council, when you're working in reserve land that the public are going to be tangibly accessing each day without any prior guidance, it's definitely a prudent due diligence approach. We wouldn't take an approach of just putting soil over the top and not understanding what was underneath it or what we were needing to cap. So yeah, the detailed site investigation, knowing the history of the site being a landfill, knowing the activity that had taken place on the site, and knowing that we were intending to return it for public health and safety, I feel it was a very necessary step to take.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
Yeah, thank you. Is there any contamination on the existing walkway?
No, so there hasn't been any testing asbestos located around the walkway, and the walkway itself, through the consenting process when it was established, it does act as a cap itself for that area of the land. So the work we are intending for the reserve will have no impact on the cycleway other than perhaps tracking across it a little bit, and there will be no disturbance to that through the road.
Well, could I actually, I would like to move that we add to our recommendation that the council approves the opening of that walkway for summer, with leaving the existing fence line in and putting tape, hazard tape along the other side, forming a pathway, and letting the community use it from now on, because it should have happened actually quite a while ago. But I would really like that to be added to our recommendation, and I'd move it.
This is a noting report.
I know. I want to change it.
Would you like me to offer some context to what we've worked on for the fence in this scenario? So we have had contacts from the community group, so thank you for the presentation this morning in relation to access to that cycleway. What we have proposed is to relocate the roadside boundary of the fence to the inside of the cycleway. So that will allow access of the cycleway right down the side of the reserve, but we'll keep the reserve closed because under the results of the DSI we are required to reduce public access to the site. So happy to take that through as one step of it.
Okay, so we can be guaranteed that cycleway would be open.
Through our project we can commit to that.
Okay, thank you.
Order.
Thank you, Chair. I've just Google mapped the area, and the log operators made a hell of a mess there. What is the current surface? Has it been well grassed or well covered with some vegetation?
It's natural vegetation at this stage, so it's
So
a
nothing's been
mixture of...
planted on?
No. So when the woody debris, the final cleanup occurred, there was still some mulched material which was spread through the reserve as well, and otherwise vegetation which remained around the outside, so there would be some grass, but there would be quite a lot of weed as well, and some other natural vegetation from the adjoining paddock.
Am I correct, supplementary question, am I correct in saying that bare ground and asbestos would be the worst combination, and that a good thick thatch would mitigate any problem from asbestos quickly?
Yes, so the brand's guidelines requires a 500ml clean fill cap over any asbestos, so that's what the current design is. Unfortunately, we're not able to take soils onto site to address that work until we've received the consent, and so that's what we're waiting for at the moment, so we're just working through the consent.
Sorry, you were unable to put what on the site?
To bring soils onto the site to fill or cap anything until we've received the consent.
supplementary question again. Would it not make sense to get a farmer to plant some vegetation over that area to help mitigate whatever risk there might be?
The risk to the asbestos is at its peak when it's friable. So while it's not disturbed and it is sitting in a soil cap and the site is not open to public, it is not causing immediate concern. So the site being closed at the moment has been closed for some time. We don't understand that's causing any concern to community other than the access to the cycleway. And I think that was mentioned this morning by an offer of tape on the inside. Our only hesitation to using tape comes from a very operational, when you're near a beach and you're dealing with winds and you're having hazard tapes and things flapping and breaking all the time, they can become very problematic to maintain. By simply moving the deer fence to the inside of the cycleway, we can ensure that the reserve remains closed for our project and for safety, and the community has access to their cycleway.
Councillor Ria.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just firstly want to acknowledge, thank you for resolving the matter around the cycleway. That there's an intention that the community will be able to use it over the summer period, which has been heavily voiced this morning, that that's a huge community want heading into the summer period. In terms of the opening up the cycleway and then the consenting for the top cap and the remediation, am I right to say that the remediation work probably won't start until next year around March, just to ensure that there's not, trucks and cyclists and walkers and all happening at the same time? So the remediation work will happen after the summer holiday period, where it would probably be used the most?
That's correct, Councillor Ria. So we have been through the planning process intending to undertake works for the remediation late February, early March, when the consent is available, with the intention that there would not be any disruption to the site over the summer period. Our concern too was that if we were to move the fence and open the cycleway and then have trucks coming in any earlier, we wouldn't want to be disturbing community use and bringing in risk. So yes, happy that that's an understanding and commitment from us that we will carry out the works late February, early March. If we can start late February, it's preferred, just so we don't start getting towards some of the wetter weather that can come. And yes, that would leave community to have access. We will remove the fence to the inside and the cycleway could be accessed over summer.
I may have missed it, but was there a, do we know how much it might cost? I see that there's 400,000 allocated from the Woody Debris Fund for the remediation activity, and then there's further money available through the council, but do we have an average of what this might cost?
From our previous projects of similar approach, my very high level estimation would be between the 600 and 800 mark. But I do just want to preface that we are working really hard to ensure that the volume of fill that needs to go onto the site is reduced as much as possible. So to Teddy's concern around the whole site being capped, that may not be necessary. We're still working through that in the design. We are also looking at an option to bring in a mixture of hard fill, broken hard fill and clean soil to reduce the costs again, because a hard fill is cheaper than clean topsoil. So we are working to reduce those as much as possible.
I'm happy to move.
Well, I think our submitters, sorry.
Yeah, you can go, Councillor Muir.
Submitters this morning had a concern about that the fence actually provided safety for the cycleway from the road. So is there a way to ameliorate that concern? And they also were keen to have maintenance done by, if possible, to have corrections through the Padre doing maintenance on the cycleway track over the next few weeks.
Absolutely, I can answer those two questions within my context as best possible and connect with those who can support afterwards. So from a Parks and Reserves livable spaces perspective, we could work with our operational team to allow access from the volunteers who are offering to support community with maintenance before summer. Any decision to maintain the cycleway after summer, I understand, would be with our Journeys and Lifelines team, as it is their asset. So sorry I can't answer that one, but definitely happy to support where we can.
Councillor Telfer.
Look, we've heard from the community this morning, and it's obviously asked that the fence there around the road corner where it sweeps around is a safety thing. Going and moving the fence, the deer fence, is a huge cost when this is actually a temporary measure we're talking about. This is going to be remediated, the soil and whatever. So this is a temporary measure. Why? Surely we can just get some second-hand posts. We've got Indivina pulling grapes out left. There's that many sitting around here for no cost, and just put a 4-wire unbattened fence up along the inside would be hugely cheaper than pulling a whole deer fence down and re-erecting, considering it's a temporary measure anyway. So, you know, I'm sure the community would actually, if we supplied the materials, the community would actually do it for no cost.
I think we could work with the community. I think it's just also having, I guess, the timeframes in mind and how we could come together really quickly as a community to look at those options. I am happy to connect with those parties. We would be some challenges in having two fences running parallel, and I do need to say that the existing fence that was put there is very likely sitting within a road corridor, so I don't believe that it would be consented to be there permanently because it is very close to the road. So I can't commit, unfortunately, that leaving that fence along the road boundary is a possible solution. I would need to get some more advice in relation to the setback of that.
Thank you.
Councillor Parata.
Thank you for the report and for the confirmation of working with community going forward. I kind of want to echo lots of Councillor Thompson. Shit, sorry, Teddy. I kind of want to echo the things that Teddy was saying in terms of our ability to be logical and practical in the way that we move forward in terms of this remediation work. And I know that we're starting to talk probably a bit more operationally now, because I was under the impression that we had already sorted this last year when it was first brought to the table. So I'm surprised to see it back here at the table saying it's still not opened. I also just want to acknowledge that in small communities, there's lots of mahi that happens unpaid, lots of volunteer work, and it's awesome that communities want to support so that things move forward, but that isn't an expectation for the city. No one is expected to do things for free in the city. So I just want to raise and acknowledge that those things happen in small communities like Uawa. It's part of what makes it magic, but we also should not take advantage as a council that there are people willing to put up fences and do maintenance and that kind of thing. The only other thing, I'm happy to second the paper with all of the context that you've given us moving forward. The only other thing I sort of felt is that the report was lacking detail, particularly around the risk to people for the asbestos. What exactly are the risks to health, public health?
That's quite a detailed question for me to answer. I guess from a technical perspective, I would be leaning on environmental management specialists to talk to that, but we understand through much research on asbestos that there is a public health and safety risk from the friable nature of asbestos and how it enters our airways. So in relation to public reserves and reserves where the public are interacting, public spaces, when we do receive the DSI reports, the detailed site investigations, they will have assessed the volume of asbestos and the location there and determined the risk to public health based on that. So it can be very low, it could be high, it could be medium, so there could be different risks. This site is further complicated from some of the fragment material that is in the upper soil layers. If you imagined that the reserve was open and we allowed Tamariki to run, barefoot across a reserve that potentially had old landfill material or glass in upper soil layers, it does pose a public health and safety risk there. So the information and advice that council received from the environmental specialists who undertook the site investigation was that the combination of the asbestos and fragments in the upper soil layers required the site to be closed to public until such time that the work had been done to remediate.
Yeah, I understand that. I just think going forward when we have these conversations, it's really helpful to council to see exactly what those risks are, so that when we have conversations, because we're quite a practical group of people and we're thinking about how we can get this facility open to the community, but understanding what the risks are to the health of our people and our tamariki will help us to make better decisions going forward. But yeah, otherwise I'm happy to second the paper and move forward.
Thank you. So thank you everyone for your questions and concerns raised. Oh, sorry, I didn't see you very quickly. Second turn.
Can I just add that this is the same site, same land, the same soil that we've had recreation activity and rugby league on for 32 years, and there's never been an issue. There's only an issue now that we've brought in these new rules. Like,
except that
the land hasn't changed, it's the same land, it's the same, nothing's changed.
The staff did tell us that the
I guess perhaps some clarity on the Councillor Thompson, what you might be referring to as the NESCS around contaminated soils, which the government introduced in 2012, and so there's quite a strong regulatory framework and rules that actually supersede or are stronger in the hierarchy, I suppose, than within the Tairāwhiti Resource Management Plan, and a lot of the activities that mightn't have triggered either a DSI or PSI or even a resource consent through those mechanisms have been captured through that. So I think it's definitely a subject that, as you mentioned, impacts the building consent and the resource consent pathway, and something that has been mentioned to central government in terms of maybe looking at that as part of their larger stage of reform in phase 3.
Thank you for that. So this is a noting report, and the recommendation on page 34 is to note it. We have a mover in Councillor Rea and a seconder in Councillor Parata, all in favour. Against? Carried. Okay, so we're going to our last paper of the day, page 39, looking at land, rivers and coastal. This is an update on what's going on in that area. Is someone coming to us? Want to introduce this, or we'll take it as read and go for questions?
I'm Mangala. I'm the team leader, Land, Rivers, Coastal. I have been working in GDC for the past 5 years. Okay, I'm in charge of the maintenance work, all 4 river schemes. So generally, a allocation, a brief introduction on maintenance work. We get targeted rates allocated for maintenance, general rates. We work on 22 drainage districts, and since Gabriel, we have been busy with throughout the region, and so we got 303 kilometers of drains, 4 pump stations, and 4 river schemes to maintain, and we got limited funds in the range of 1 million throughout, for the entire region. So that is limiting our work, and also at the same time we get Gabriel nature disasters. So we had to work on those. At the same time, we have a flood warning manual, actually CDM and flood warning manual, flood warning. We are working on emergency work and all the emergency related evacuation processes. That is not a part of the maintenance, but flood warning manual is maintained by our team.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Thompson.
Just one question, page 45. Extra costs in terms of management of eels requiring double handling of spoil. So instead of doing it once, you're doing it twice, so it's probably double the cost. You're going to through my place, and the kids come down and catch a few eels, and there's a few casualties. Like for me, it's not really major if you lose a few eels, and seems like a few eels having to double handling is huge cost. Can we not accept that we're going to lose a few eels? Do we need that doubling of costs over a few eels?
Yeah, it has been challenging because our budget hasn't been increased, but at the same time, now that traffic management plans and eel handling, both comes as under RMA. We must do those. So during last operation, recently last month, we got while we were handling, we have to send another crew to work on the mud and take eels out, and after the work relocate the eels. So it's at least another 25% extra cost.
Is this a national thing making us do it, or
right?
So it's not how we're interpreting that. So every other place is doing the same thing. It's not just the way we're interpreting the act.
Yeah, under the RMA and RMA, this in the consent, it was clearly spelled we have to manage the eels and other environmental conditions. So based on that, otherwise it's going to be a compliance issue for us.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson.
Councillor Aubrey, are you going to speak to our tuna as taonga, or would you like me to?
You have the microphone. You have the microphone.
How about you speak to the tuna, Councillor Aubrey, and I'll follow up with my next question. Is that all right?
If that's all right with the chair. So I just want to draw our attention back to environmental degradation and our environmental responsibilities. Our whole council has made a commitment to oranga wai and oranga o te taiao, and so I hear a comment like eels, a couple of eels, and actually Te Tairāwhiti hosts, we're fortunate enough to have present both types of eels. Yes, both types of native eels. One is in great distress and one is not, but they all add to the biodiversity of every single waterway. So even though it seems like just a tiny little thing, it's actually super important, and it's super important in terms of the whole ecosystem of the awa and what eels do towards that awa, especially when the council is engaging in good faith in any activity along an awa or a drain which is home to our tuna, that it's important that we consider the neighbours and the people who live next to that awa, but it's also important that we consider what's in that awa and what each of those things in that awa do for the entire environment and the flow on. So it's not just what happens in the upper catchment Taruhiru rivers, because those rivers, if eels aren't present there, they don't flow into the Taruhiru. They then don't flow into the Turanganui. It's an interconnected river system, and so it's really important that we do pay close attention to the fact that we as a council make a commitment not to further degrade any ecosystem, especially our rivers and our drains, given that oranga wai is a priority. And that being said, I would like to move the paper. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gibson, do you want to chip in now?
Thank you. Yes, I could speak to tuna as well. There are actually 3 species of tuna. The Australasian speckled longfin as well in our awa. There are pātiki in those same stretches where the willows inhabit as well, our flounder. There's kanakana, there's many different species that are present, but I'll leave that alone. My question sits around aerial application of spray versus manual application of spray. I've got questions as to the risk to our waterways, whether that spray drift will end up through aerial application in our waterways and therefore having an impact on our mahinga kai species. I do have questions around, I know in those same willow areas on the other side of the bank, there's actually quite a few riparian plantings as well. So I have questions around the spray drift on those plantings and also the grassland and what time of year we will do the spraying in respects to the inanga spawning site. So the other risks to mitigate on our environment and our mahinga kai species around choosing aerial spraying rather than really distinct manual spraying, if that's okay.
Okay, I'll respond to Inanga matter first and then general area spraying secondly. So Inanga spawning areas, we have our consent only allows us to work only in October and November. So whether there's any problem, we have to wait until that period. So we had to delay sometimes, some critical issues, flooding, like last year, Makeretu, we got many complaints on flooding, but because of Inanga spawning area, so we had to adhere. We are fully in favor of comply with RMA regulations and the consent conditions. So we waited until last October, not like this year, but last year, to rectify the problem, and now Makeretu problems were completely solved. So Inanga spawning areas, we never work any part of the year other than October and November. So that is Inanga area. And the second one, general spraying. General spraying, we do manual spraying operations starting from October, and it goes until March every year, 6 months period, depending on the waterway, because there are waterways categorized under scheduled waterways, and there are several categories. In that categories, we can work only like Inanga spawning areas. There are periods given. So generally from October to March, we do spraying, manual spraying, and it takes months actually. So like Tairāwhiti, last time we sprayed 2.5 months, and we exposed to wind, rainy weather, and different weather conditions. And during that period, these, because we had to wait for spraying, we had to wait until the willows or any other plants get leaves. So that is in October, and while we are doing pesticides, we spray glyphosate, and pesticides might end up with in waterways because we can't give 100% guarantee. So that is normal manual spraying. But when we do aerial spraying, it's a matter of 1 day. If it is helicopter, 1 day you can do the entire river scheme to do the operation within 1 day. So if you select less wind, dry day, and it's died off, and it's a single operation. But we haven't done any research which one is more effective and how sensitive on waters, but based on the common understanding, that's much faster and less harmful for us, but it's very hard to convince. So if you do drone spraying, it takes 1 week, but it's low, like not helicopter jet spraying, that is much more targeted, but drone spraying, it's at low level, and the spread area is less, not like helicopter. So there are pluses and positives and negatives. So we are trying to balance everything to preserve our environment and maintain our, we have an agreement to maintain the river scheme. So we have a commitment to the community. So we have to address that as well as balance, while balancing the environment. So we are trying the best practices, but it's very hard to explain community, because when you talk about aerial spraying, everybody, the first thing is it's objecting, but just duration and time and cost. Aerial spraying, it cost maybe 15,000 for the entire operation of the river scheme, but manual spraying cost 100,000 because one truck goes with 3 people, monitoring crew, and other environmental conditions, water and everything. So at the end, it's 100,000 versus 50,000. And so we have to balance finances, targeted rate money, at the same time environment. So what we are doing is to do our best engineering judgment and best practices.
Thank you. So I've got next Councillor Alder, then Councillor Parata, then Councillor Muir.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll declare a conflict of interest, although because I live and benefit from the TRI. It's also been my awa since I was 7, and I've enjoyed every aspect of it. Backing up what Mangala was saying about helicopter spraying, and I was spraying thistles yesterday. When you're knapsack spraying, you can do it well if you're pointing it down. If you're spraying a willow tree, you've actually got to get the leaves, which are up there. So you're going to be pointing that jet up. That's far more likely to get drift. You're also spraying, as you said, for a whole week. You're going to get a massive variation of weather conditions, whereas in quick with a helicopter, under ideal conditions, you can minimise the spray drift. I'd like to get, another thing about the willows, they have to go. They shade out the grasses that the inanga spawn on. And so if we can get rid of the willows in the short term, we're then going to benefit the river in the long term. Now, eels. As a kid, I watched and we chased after the diggers to catch the eels that the digger pulled out of the drains. And I want to question the science about double handling the wood, not the wood, sorry, the dirt that's been taken out of the river or the stream or ditch. Because we would find dead eels, and the dead eels were ones that were hit directly with the digger. The eels are very capable of digging through mud and digging their way out of the spoil. Has this idea that the spoil has to be double-handled actually been scientifically checked, that it is beneficial to the eel? Question mark.
Yeah, recently we have done digging, 2 weeks ago at Scotch Drain at Waipor, and we got 30 eels. And so what they do is there's a photograph here, so you can see they have in the report there's a photograph. So they dug up and put the spoils in the bank, and then little away from the bank, because under the consent we had to leave it 20 meters away. And there's a crew, they just go and dig up eels and put it into another tank and put oxygen in it. So there's an additional vehicle, 2 people, 2 to 3 people are there. And then after they relocate the eels, again another machine has to come from the land side and take it out and cart it out elsewhere. So that is double handling. Otherwise, the same machine can cart out, straight away put the material to the truck.
Thank you. Next we've got Councillor Parata.
I don't want to upset the other councillors at the table, but I'm not that passionate about tuna, to be honest. What I am passionate about is our people and the quality of their lives. But I think it's important to have these conversations at the table where those of us who are very passionate about the environment and environmental balance, and those of us who are very passionate about economic viability, and those of us like myself who are very passionate about the quality of life of our people, those conversations happen at this table, because I think what we're all asking for is innovation, and where innovation can be applied to get the best outcomes. And I sort of, I don't want things to be ridiculously expensive for our people, because we cannot continue to rate them in the way that we're rating them now. But we know that we need all of these outcomes. We need to preserve the quality of our waters. We need to be preserving the resilience of our awa and our whenua, and of course the tuna, but in harmony and balance with the needs of our people. And so, if anything, and this is more of a comment, I suppose, than an actual question, is that going forward, what I'd like council to do is to think about the approach. The approach to the projects that we're doing, and the way in which we're working with people, and where there can be innovation and science applied to best practice. That's my main thing.
Thank you, Councillor Parata. Councillor Muir.
Just the 5% of the network being regraded in a year, that seems a low number. Is there a number that you'd ideally like to do for flood mitigation risks of regrading in a year? And just in addition to that, I was just wondering, is that double handling of the spoil, like in the past, would the spoil have just been left along the side there, and so the eels could come out, but now the spoil is being removed and taken elsewhere after the eels have been removed?
For the first question, 5%, we would prefer, because we got 303 kilometers of drain, but not all the drains are like, accumulating or just silting heavily. So out of that, around 50% is silting heavily. So in general, within the allocation, we can't do more than 5%. But during Gabriel, we got extra funding, and I have done, our team has done, like 50% of the drains in Manatuke and Patitai. So if we get money, we can work more, but based on the targeted rates and allocated money within each drainage district, like Muriwai, annual allocation is 22,000. So within 22,000, can't even do 1 kilometer of drain. So it's a small drain. Major drain, you need 100,000 if you want to do 1 kilometer of drain. So likewise, we have to balance within the given budget. It's not like we would prefer to do more, but for that we need funds, and for that you need to increase targeted rates and provide us money.
Tim Barry's got something to say.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just related to rates, related to our drainage, we're talking about a number of issues here, including management of how we undertake the spray program, the drainage of 5%, which tells Councillor Muir that's 20 years cycle. It seems a bit long. A lot of what we're doing is happened in isolation of adjusting rates to suit these requirements, and so we tend to lean on events and external funding to lift our assets up. They haven't been taking care of themselves across the board. So there is a discussion we need to have our communities in the future about how we fund the maintenance of drainage and services and efficiency of such. By hemming this work in those 2 short months, those are also the time when the contractors are busy elsewhere as well, so we never get a competitive market at that point, and we've got really constrained time that we can do things. So we need to recognise that. If the direction from Council is to meet all those requirements, then meeting that is higher rates for people. That's sort of simple as that. Otherwise, we're just always going to be a little bit behind.
Thank you. Councillor Telfer.
Yeah, probably hit the nail on the head, Tim, is we've only ever got so much money, and we've got to start learning to be a bit more efficient the way that we actually spend that money. Seem hell-bent on just wanting to go back for more money all the time. And if you look at those 3 risk areas, the double handling to me is just, sorry, I think that's out the gate. But we've also got traffic management requirements have increased costs. And after all the work we did around traffic management, trying to get it reduced, I'm very surprised to see that traffic management requirements have increased. So, look, yeah, I'm just struggling really. I think we're not getting our bang for our buck, and in the perfect world we'd like everything perfect, but we've got to start using our money wisely, I think.
Does anyone else have any questions apart from Councillor Thompson, who's already had a turn? I'll give him a very short one.
I want to say something.
Okay.
I'm just going to catch up both what Councillor Meir and Councillor Telfer said, because we have had that discussion before, and it is timely going into the 10-year plan. When we had our floods and we were on the plains and talking to Liederbrand and others that were affected, it became obvious that I think we only had like a $200,000 or a small budget for a huge area. And also the time, say every 15 to 20 years, you would, or 10 to 15 years, you would do that. And the discussion is now to say, is that still appropriate? And do we need to allocate more money to do more work and more often? So going into the 10-year plan, that's definitely a discussion we will have with the communities as well, because some of those are quite keen to contribute more if it means they don't have flooding all the time. There are some areas that there will always be flooding. It doesn't matter how we dig or what we dig, they live in floodplains. Going to your comment earlier, I just think we need to clarify when we make statements like we just need to work smarter with our money. We have some obligations under the RMA. We cannot just decide, let's go and dig out a few inanga or do a few eels out of their house because we are obligated by the RMA. And so I hear what you're saying, but we also are trying to do this work with one of our hands tied behind our back because the RMA is not fit for purpose, and we know that. And I do want to take this opportunity to congratulate Mangala and her team. For last year, the Makaretu stream was a nightmare because they were flooded, and I dealt one-on-one with the people affected. These guys, Josh went out of his way to apply for a variation to the consent to do the work outside of the areas, and it was a lot of money and a lot of time to accommodate a traumatized community who were flooded several times every few weeks, 6 weeks when we had those floods. And then the day when they dug, they were right, there was just, the inanga were there and they had to stop. And then it flooded a week or two later again. But these guys really do go out of their way to try and accommodate and work smarter around the RMA. But I think if we make comments like we need to work smarter with our money, we also need to put a caveat in there. Often it's not us not being smart, it is us having to follow dumb rules. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. It's not about eels though, is it?
Yeah, I just want to clarify my comment. What came as a cross as a bit of a monster, not caring about the environment. The environment's actually, for me, is huge. Anyone who knows me, the environment is huge, and I'll probably come across the right way. What I was meaning was, is the balance there? Does the balance there make sense? I mentioned the kids catching a couple eels, dig it out, we might lose a couple eels. Is it? I was talking more about having things in balance, because if you're digging out 50 metres instead of 100 metres, then you get some rain and you might flood, and there's actually a larger environmental impact because you haven't dug out the drains. What I was alluding to was having a bit of common sense balance there. Does it actually warrant, like, what's the biggest risk, losing a couple of eels or not digging? I was more talking about the balance. I probably came across wrong, thinking, I don't care about eels, which is not the case. I'm actually huge on the environment.
Thank you for that clarification, Councillor Thompson. Okay, so I have a mover in Councillor Rea and sort of got a seconder in Councillor Gibson, is that correct?
Yes, he's nodding.
Okay, so all in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. And that brings us to a close, our Environment and Communities meeting. Thank you very much, everyone.
Put our hands together for our new chair. Well done, Debbie.
Well done.
Very well. Thank you.
Oh, should we close with Karakia?
Do you want to close with Karakia?
Nice to close with Karakia, if that's okay.
Karakia. Colin. We're doing a karakia.
Ino tātou kia tātou katoa te atu whai o te atua me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu ake.
Thank you, everyone.